Very important to get that done before you make the batter because our chemical leaveners inside the batter are going to start to function as soon as we mix it. So we do need to get this step done first. So in this pot right here, I have a pot of boiling water, it's just boiling, and then I have my eggs. Now I specifically have purchased medium eggs. Traditionally people buy large eggs for baking, but I bought medium eggs just because I'm going to do this in a regular size muffin pan. So that's going to be just a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit better, kind of a little bit more for my batter. Now, a lot of times when you boil an egg, the shell can bust, and the reason for that is at the very bottom of an egg, there's an air cell. And as that air expands with the heat, if it expands too quickly, it can cause the shell to bust open. And there's a couple things that you can do to try and help avoid that. One is to let your eggs come to room temperature before you boil them. It's pretty hard to do in the industry because you're not necessarily always planning or something may come up. So you can do that. Another thing you can do is just boil extra eggs, assuming that maybe 10-15% of them will burst, but that's kind of wasteful. So another thing you can do, so I have not let these come to room temperature, so I'm just going to use a little thumbtack and go into the bottom of each of the egg, just to make a hole all the way through, just like that. And what that does is as the air expands, it just gives it somewhere to escape. So I'm going to do that with all of my eggs. And once it's done, I'm going to add it into my boiling water. And I'm going to cook them for exactly 6 minutes. You can see I have my timer. Eggs cook incredibly quickly, and I want to try and make sure not to overcook my egg yolk. So if you overcook the egg yolk, it starts to get really kind of pasty in texture, and you can start to get that kind of sulfury, bad egg flavor that we don't really love in our eggs. So I definitely want to try and avoid that. Also, these eggs are being cooked twice basically, so I'm boiling them here, but then they're going to cook again when they're in the oven. So if I overcook them here, they're going to be super overcooked in the oven. So really important that I'm paying close attention to how long. So I'm doing it for exactly 6 minutes, which is giving me a pretty soft boiled egg. A lot of people have a lot of different methods out there for boiling eggs. There's putting the eggs in with cold water and let the water boil, with the eggs inside. I've seen steaming eggs, stuff like that. This is, to me, the most foolproof and most efficient way. There's not a lot of planing or anything. Just boil some water. Throw some eggs. If I planned a little bit better, I could save a couple minutes by not having to do this, but that's not too big of a deal. So I'm going to use some sort of slotted spoon to lower my eggs. If I just drop them, if they would all the way to the bottom, they can bust when they hit the bottom of the pan. Also, boiling water can splash up me and burn, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to gently lay them in, and then very quickly get my next ones in, so they're all on the same quantity. Just like that. And you can see that they were cold, and my water kind of stopped boiling for a second, but it's going to come back pretty rapidly, so I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 6 minutes, and when it goes off, we're going to get them out, and we're going to drop them immediately into an ice bath. And you might think that ice baths should probably be part of my mise en place, but I usually like to wait, if I can, just so that my ice bath is super, super cold, especially in a hot kitchen like today. If I had gotten my ice bath earlier, it could have gotten kind of melted and not really be that cold anymore. So really important that it's nice and cold. So while these are cooking, I have a chance to go get my ice bath. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so it's been 6 minutes, so I'm going to go back in with the same utensil I used before, some sort of slotted spoon, and I'm going to collect my eggs quickly, and then I'm going to put them directly into my ice bath. So hopefully you can see my ice bath. It's mostly ice and also some water. So that's going to do several things for me. It's going to cool down my egg really, really quickly, which means that I can handle them really soon, which is great for efficiency. Turn off my water as well. So it's going to cool them really quickly so I can use them, number one. Number two, it's going to get them to a safe temperature really quickly, so we don't want them to stay in the temperature danger zone too long. So by getting them in here, they're going to cool down safely instead of just sitting out at room temperature. And most importantly for this recipe is it's going to take them down to, most importantly for this recipe, it's going to stop the cooking. So really important that we have, we don't overcook our egg yolks. So if we had just taken them out and put them in, off to the side or something like that, the eggs actually, the residual heat would continue to cook the eggs through to the center. So we don't want that. So really important that we kind of shock them cold. So even right now, if I pick one up, they're really easy to handle. So I'm going to let them sit here just for a couple minutes to make sure that the chill has gone all the way through. And as soon as they're ready to go, I'm going to start peeling them. So it's been a couple minutes with our eggs in the ice bag and they're nice and cold. So now it's time to peel them. I'm just going to grab one and just break it on a flat surface like I would any other egg. And literally I'm just going to peel back the shell. Some people will do this under running water, which just kind of helps wash off any like little shards or shells. I don't usually, sometimes if I have a particularly rough batch, I might give them a little bit of a rinse off after. This part is a little time consuming. Ooh, this is actually perfect. You see the gap here? You can actually see in the shell that there it goes. You see that little shadow here at the top? That's the air cell I was talking about. See how it's not exactly attached to the shell right there? That's the air gap. So or the air cell wrapper. So if I peel like this, you can kind of see how the egg kind of flattens out. That's where our air cell is. And you often see it when you peel an egg and there's like a flat bottom. That's that, I don't know why I'm putting them on the table. I got a trash can right here. That's the air cell that I talked about. So anyway, I'm just going to go through and peel all of these eggs until they're all completely peeled. And then we can start making our muffin batter. So before we make our muffin batter, we need to make our bacon. So we're going to start off with our already smoked and cured bacon. We're going to lay it here on this sheet tray. So hopefully you can see how I have my sheet tray set up. It's a full sheet tray with a piece of parchment underneath and then with a cooling rack on top. Now the cooling rack is kind of important for when you're baking. You could bake it directly on the sheet pan, but this allows for air circulation while it's baking, so the bottom gets crispy and doesn't kind of steam underneath. So that's kind of important. You could fry bacon in a pan. That's how most people do it at home, and that's a totally awesome way to cook bacon. But if you imagine in the industry, if you were a breakfast restaurant, or especially like when you think about a buffet where they cook tons and tons of bacon, it would take forever to cook bacon that way. Or like when I was at JMU for the dining hall, obviously we do tons and tons of bacon. So this is a really more efficient way to do this. And a lot of places will actually, some poorly sliced bacon. A lot of places will actually, for their breakfast, they'll set this up on trays the night before, put it's called a speed rack bag, a plastic bag over top of the speed rack, put it in the fridge, so when they come in, the bacon is already ready to go first thing in the morning, so they're not doing this part very early in the morning. So I'm just going to lay out all this bacon nice and evenly. put it into my preheated oven, and I'm just gonna bake it until it is nice and crisp. So it'll be nice and crisp inside my muffin. Every time you cook raw meat, make sure to clean and sanitize your station before moving forward. Okay, so it's time to take our bacon out of the oven. I decided to use our convection oven rather than our deck ovens because our convection ovens have fans, which means there's a lot of air circulation, and that also helps make sure the bottom of our bacon is nice and crispy. So hopefully you'll be able to see that it's crisped up nicely. It also has shrank a lot. That's just what bacon does. On the speed rack. You're on a speed rack right now. So I'm just gonna let that cool until it's cool enough for me to handle, and then I'm going to chop it up for our muffins. Our bacon has cooled all the way through, and now we're touching ready to eat food. We need to wear gloves. Technically, this bacon is ready to eat, even though it's going to get baked again. But I'm not using all of this bacon, so I wanted to make sure I was having gloves on. But I did want to show you that it is completely crisp. It's not soggy at all. So because of the convection in our oven, the fans going, as well as the cooling rack, we were able to keep our bacon nice and crispy, even though it wasn't pan fried. So I'm going to use about 4 pieces, and I want to chop it up. And funny thing, because I'm filming this over the summer, and I just went over to Chef Hawkins' classroom to borrow a knife, and he has them locked up, and I don't have a key. So in this world, we have to be flexible. So I wasn't looking for any pretty cuts. When you cut already cooked bacon, it's not ever going to be like these perfect shapes. It's going to kind of shard. So I'm actually just going to use a bench scraper, and it's going to work just fine. So I'm just going to basically kind of run through it, and you can hopefully see, maybe if I can flip it so my hand's not in the way. As soon as I break through, it just kind of breaks into shards. You know, and sometimes we have to be flexible. Maybe we're on an off-site catering event, and we have to figure out how to do something without the tools that we're used to, or all the dishes are dirty, or even the idea that you don't have access to something, or you never know. So it's a good idea to practice being flexible all the time. So I have never chopped bacon with a bench scraper, but I tell you what, it's working just fine. So I'm just going to chop all this up, and then we'll be ready to go on our muffins, and then we can mix our muffins. Okay, so we have all of our mise en place here. We have all of our dry ingredients, a spatula and a whisk. Our wet ingredients here are mix-ins, a little bit of cheese to put on top, our boiled eggs, and a little bit of flour, extra flour. I'll show you what to do with that later. Our muffin pans are pan spray and a piping bag. So now we have everything ready. We can get started. Okay, so I'm going to start by preparing my pan. And for this particular recipe, I don't actually prefer muffin liners. I do prefer pan spray. Just because, especially if you go for maybe a softer egg on the inside, it gets a little bit messy. This is kind of something you probably still want to eat on a plate anyway, so it's a little bit easier for your customer. So I am going to spray these, but these muffins are going to be a little big because of the egg inside, so I'm actually going to only spray every other one so that they don't touch each other when they bake. So I'm just going to go to every other, not that one, just like that. And remember, you don't want to spray more than you have to because one of those pan spray is not cheap. And two, that pan spray can burn and kind of have a bitter odor in your oven, which you don't want either. Alright, so those are ready. So now we can mix our muffins. So this uses the muffin method. So our muffin method is combine all of our dry, combine all of our wet, add wet to dry. So in here we have all of our dry, so it's our flour, our baking powder, a little bit of sugar, salt. This is kosher salt. Be sure whenever you're following a recipe that you're paying attention to what salt it says. If it just says salt, that means table salt, but if it says kosher salt, use kosher salt because they have different levels of salt. I also have some paprika in here because paprika and eggs are just awesome if you think about like the southern deviled eggs, you always see a little sprinkle of paprika on there. A little bit of cayenne. It's not going to provide a ton of heat, but it's just going to like give it a little bit of life, especially with our cheese. And add this like really interesting amount of life. So it's not going to be spicy, but it's just going to be like this little something for us. And you can get creative with the spices and herbs if you want. You could add all kinds of stuff to this, but this is what I'm going to do today. So I'm just going to go ahead and whisk these together until they're all nice and combined. It's nice when you have dry ingredients that have like a spice in them because you can really see when it's all evenly distributed. You don't have like streaks. So like that paprika, you know, I can see a big red streak when I first started to mix it. Now I don't. So I know that I have everything nice and incorporated. It's hard to tell when everything's white. Baking powder, baking soda, salt, sugar, all these things are white. Alright, so now I'm going to combine my wet ingredients. So my wet ingredients are melted butter and milk. So I've let this butter kind of cool down a little bit. So you can actually see it's turning a little opaque because it's a little cool. So it's still liquid because it's important. All of our fats have to be liquid in the muffin method, but it's not hot. I've also let this milk come to room temperature, which if you need to speed that up, you can put it in the microwave. And I did that so that when I combine these two, we're not going to shock the butter. So if I added really, really cold milk to warm butter, what will happen is it'll go back to the state, its cold state, and it'll be these like little like shards of butter, which is not what we want. Sometimes you might see people specifically do that for like a quick biscuit kind of method, but here we don't want that. So, and I always kind of do a little test to make sure it's not going to go. It's not. You can usually tell pretty quickly if it's going to start to turn into little pieces. And you'll notice this muffin doesn't have 8 eggs in it. Well, it will. It's going to have actually a lot of egg in it. But we kind of needed a stiffer batter to hold our egg in place, so I found that eliminating the egg will really help give it a little bit stiffer. So you'll see that this batter is much stiffer than a lot of muffin batters are. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to switch from my whisk to my spatula real quick so I get all that liquid out. And I'm going to start with my whisk, but I'll probably switch back to my spatula because, like I said, it is a little stiff. And I do have mix-in, so I don't want to mix this until it's all the way combined because I don't want it to get tough. So yeah, so you see like that? It's almost combined. A couple more stirs going to be there. So that's when I'm going to switch. Again, anytime you add gluten, or anytime you add wheat flour, and you have liquid and agitation, you're going to start to get gluten formation. So I'm going to add my cheese. And yeah, it's a lot of cheese. Nothing wrong with that. And bacon. And then I'm just going to gently fold this together. Until it's all incorporated, and I don't want to do it any more than I have to, remember, because I don't want to over agitate. Alright, so just like that. And then we're going to start putting it in on muffins. I'm actually going to use a piping bag because it's going to make it a little bit easier than if I did a scoop, because I'm going to try and get the muffin batter to go around the egg. And I don't want to have to like force the egg in and possibly break open the egg. So stuff like this, if I haven't done it in a while, I like to do one before I do them all to make sure I have it right in my head. Sometimes, you know, if you haven't done something in a long time, you think you remember exactly how to do it, and then you get into it and it's not exactly right. So I'm going to start with a little of the dough on the bottom, and then I'm going to kind of pipe a circle around. Can you see that? Then I can take one of my eggs. Actually, I'm going to dry that off in a second. Dry this off a little bit because there's still a little bit of water in that bowl. Dry it off a little bit, and then I'm going to coat it in my flour. And that's just going to help it stay suspended and kind of adhere it to the batter. So it's almost like it becomes one as opposed to it being kind of separate. So I'm going to kind of gently nuzzle that in. And then I can pipe around. And I'm going to do the same thing for all of my muffins. Okay, so I've got all my muffins piped, but before I continue, I want to share like the biggest mistake I made in the industry that I regret all the time. And that's that I didn't take super great notes on my recipes because I was always in a rush and I was just kind of writing a general idea, and I often forgot a lot of details thinking, oh, I remember that, and then maybe years go by before you make it again and I don't remember anymore. So one of those examples is right here with the yield. So I kind of guessed and I got super wrong. So I actually made half of what I thought, which is not very efficient, right? Because I sprayed that pan, so now I have to wash it. I have other boiled eggs because I wanted to have enough, and now I have to figure out something to do with. So I share this with you so that you can learn from my mistake. Please, please, please make sure you take really, really great notes when you're writing your recipes. You think you'll remember, you will not. You will not. And yield is something that we often forget to write in particular. But it's really, really helpful. So if you had a customer who wanted these muffins, you don't know how many your recipe makes, you don't know how much you need. So this one made 6. Well, if she needs 12, well, I would not have made enough today because I thought in my head it was 12 and then I was completely wrong, way wrong actually. So I definitely highly suggest you take really, really great notes. Another thing I didn't note was that the batter was thick enough that you kind of had to smooth it out. So I'm going to do that now. So add to our mise en place a baby offset spatula. And all you got to do is kind of come around just like that, just to smooth out those kind of piping marks so you don't have the poop emoji looking muffins. But it is important that this batter be nice and thick, otherwise as it bakes, the egg will just seep to the bottom. Baking time is really important here too. Not only do you, if you bake it too long, you risk drying out the muffin part, you risk overcooking the eggs. So these actually cook a lot quicker than you think. We're also going to cook these on a high heat so that the outside cooks quickly. So we're not kind of going on a little lower heat. That's pretty important as well. So keep going all the way around so they're all nice and smooth, and then they're going to go into my preheated oven until they're done, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, another silly mistake to share, and a great selling point for mise en place is I forgot to put the cheese on top. So I do have my cheese here, but that's why we do our mise en place, because this was a great reminder that I should have had cheese on top. So if I was in bakery and I didn't put the cheese on top, that might be your customer's favorite part, because it'll get a little kind of crispy on top. So, oops, but thank goodness for mise en place. So I'm just going to add cheese on top to each one. It's also going to look really nice as well. This is just like a nice little addition that can kind of bring some intrigue to the look of your muffin. A lot of muffins have some sort of topping, whether it be some kind of streusel or a glaze. So cheese is a really great option for a savory muffin, but you could do a savory crumble on top. You could, if this like has bacon on it, you could have a small piece of bacon, maybe that was like this big on top, kind of as a garnish when you bake it. You know, But it's a good idea to have some sort of finishing touch to your muffins, and these you kind of got a little, because they're so stacked up, gotta give them a little love so that they adhere really well. I can't believe I almost missed that. It's my favorite part. My favorite part of everything is cheese. Cheese is my favorite. My favorite food. Okay, now they're ready to go into my 450 degree oven. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes. It's time to check on our muffins. Now remember, even though they're really big, they actually bake faster because one, I have it as a really high temperature, but two, the inside is not batter. The inside is an already cooked egg. So I'm only cooking this kind of like thin amount of batter all along the sides and the top. So I just want to poke it, and if it bounces back, that means that I am good. And you can see the cheese got nice and toasty on top. It looks delicious. So again, very important that I don't overbake this so I don't end up cooking that egg yolk anymore than I already cooked it. So I'm going to take this out now, and I'm going to let it cool. All right, so our muffins have come out of the oven and they've cooled for a while, so we do want to be kind of gently. They haven't cooled all the way. We do want to be gentle, so we don't want to break them. Put them to the side. And I like to, especially when they're warm, use my offset spatula to kind of get in there and help lift them up. So I don't want the tops to break off. And you can see if you were offered that for breakfast, that's a nice, generous muffin. Oh my God, and it smells like baked cheese. If I said that cheese is my favorite, so you can do it that way, or if they're coming off really well, you can kind of tip them over and then just gently release them. A lot of bakers will just like dump out all the muffins, which usually works really well. Sometimes you might break one or two. But I find that, especially with baked cheese, that it can stick a little bit more than you bargained for. So I like to just be a little bit more careful with these. Don't want the tops to break off. Just like that. All right, so now it's time for the moment of truth. We're gonna cut in and see how we did. And I did happen to find a knife from someone up in the upstairs office. So this is a serrated knife. I don't know why they have it, but anyway, it's not gonna cut nearly as well as if I had like a chef's knife. So this is not at all what I would recommend, but I can't get Dora chef's knives right now. I guess I will need to bring some knives from home, but anyway. So I'm just gonna gently cut through my muffin to check out my surprise inside. And just like that, you can see our yolk is not overcooked. It's still just slightly creamy. And our egg white is nice and tender and perfect. And our batter is baked evenly as well. So I'm very happy with this. Now, it kind of depends on your service. So this type of cooked egg would be great for if you're a bakery where it's like a lot of people coming getting coffee and kind of grab and go, because they could eat this while they're moving around. But if you were doing something in a bake shop, maybe where people would sit and stay, you could actually cook your egg a little bit less, and then you would have like a really runny yolk, almost like its own sauce inside, which would be really, really cool as well. But terrible if you're a kind of a grab and go kind of business. If you imagine your customer biting in and just sauce going all over their suit or their dress or whatever they're wearing. So anyway, there is our finished product, our egg inside of our muffin.